Italians head to the polls in a vote that could see its politics turn sharply to the right. Russian-appointed authorities collect votes for the so-called referendum in Moscow-controlled regions of Ukraine.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov slams the West's approach to the war in Ukraine at UN General Assembly as protesters detained across Russia. Over 500,000 homes on Canada's Atlantic coast without power after Storm Fiona slammed the shore, bringing winds of up to 137 kilometres an hour.
The polls opened in Italy on Sunday morning as the country votes in a snap election that could move its politics sharply towards the right, during a critical time for Europe with the war in Ukraine skyrocketing energy bills and testing Western unity. The right-wing alliance is formed by Brothers of Italy leader Giorgia Meloni, League leader Matteo Salvini and Silvio Berlusconi, the three-time premier who heads the Forza Italia party. In the run-up to the election, opinion polls suggested Meloni had been leading in popularity, and if she becomes premier, she'll be the first woman in Italy to hold the office. Former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte heads the populist Five Star movement, which eschews Italy's left-right political binary. Enrico Letta, leader of the Democratic Party, is Italy's principal centre-left force and the main rival to Giorgia Meloni. In Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia, Russian-appointed authorities are going door-to-door to collect votes for the so-called referendum to join Russia, in a move aimed at legitimising Moscow's imminent annexation of Ukrainian territories. On the front line, soldiers have also expressed their vote. Russia says the so-called voting will take place until Tuesday. The referendums are being conducted on the basis of the decisions of the local government authorities. The conditions of those referendums have been published. And following those referendums, as I already said, Russia, of course, will respect the expression of the will of those people who, for many years, have been suffering from the abuses of the neo-Nazi regime. On the Ukrainian side, in cities like Kramatorsk, residents are looking on with dismay at the Moscow-organised vote, which Kyiv and the West have called a sham. What can I say about the referendum? It's obviously unlawful. That's our land, Ukrainian land. And all the things they're doing there, I don't know. I just think they have nothing to do. In our land, we are Ukrainians. Ukraine's allies have confirmed they will not recognise Russia's sovereignty in the regions. But, as with Crimea, once annexed, the move may prove difficult to reverse.
Speaking on Saturday at the UN General Assembly in New York, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made the Kremlin's position on current international affairs very clear. He accused the US of trying to turn the entire world into its own backyard, but also attacked the West's general position on Russia and the war in Ukraine. The official Russophobia in the West has reached an unprecedented, grotesque scale. They are not shying away from declaring their intent to inflict military defeat upon our country, but also to destroy and fracture Russia. Meanwhile, in Russia, more than 700 protesters against the partial mobilization of reserve troops were detained across 32 cities. There was also a heavy presence of law enforcement in the capital. Most demonstrators made an effort to be inconspicuous to avoid being held by police. The partial mobilization was ordered by President Vladimir Putin this week and is expected to bolster Moscow's operations in Ukraine.
The death of a young Iranian woman who died in custody after she was detained by morality police has struck a nerve in the country. For 8 days, there have been protests across Iran. At least 35 people are dead. Government websites have been hacked, and videos of women cutting off their hair or burning their headscarves have gone viral. Mahsa Amini was detained in Tehran for so-called inappropriate clothing by authorities enforcing the Islamic Republic's strict dress code. In that same city, drivers sound their horns in support of the ongoing demonstrations against the mandatory headscarf law. Police say the 22-year-old woman died of a heart attack and had pre-existing medical conditions, but her family has refuted those claims. Protests have spread to the Iraqi city of Erbil. They're chanting women, life, freedom. The Iranian anti-government demonstrations are now being met with pro-regime rallies, but protesters say they won't be deterred.
Ambulances carrying some of the victims from the deadliest migrant boat tragedy to have hit Lebanon so far. Bodies of some of the 77 people killed when a vessel carrying migrants capsized off the Syrian coast were returned to Tripoli amid outpourings of anger, sorrow and gunfire. Among them Palestinians, Syrians and Lebanese who were trying to reach Cyprus. Despite the agony felt by families of the victims, many here maintain that conditions in the region are driving people to attempt the same perilous journeys.
They reached a point where they wanted to die at sea. They said this: we want to die at sea. Trips could continue to happen. What do they want here? Me, if the boat came here now, I would go.
There's no livelihood, there's no work, there's no future. We are trapped. The some 20 migrants who managed to survive the shipwreck are now being cared for in Syria.
The powerful storm Fiona slammed into Canada's Atlantic coast, knocking out electricity to more than 500,000 homes. The strong winds and heavy rains have been described by police in the east of the country as like nothing they've ever seen. Though downgraded from a hurricane, Fiona still packed gusts of 137 kilometres per hour as it barreled ashore in the early hours of Saturday after battering the Caribbean. On Prince Edward Island, some 82,000 households lost power. Electricity lines were pulled down and roofs punctured by fallen trees. Severe weather warnings are in place for much of the east coast. Rainfall of up to 125 millimetres was recorded in Nova Scotia, and waves of up to 12 metres too. A nuclear power plant in Belgium has officially been taken off the grid for the first time after its reactor Doel 3 was shut down on Friday evening. Dismantling the reactor took place 20 years after the political decision to abandon nuclear power for good, and 40 years after the plant was built. It's Belgium's first nuclear reactor to be permanently shut down. Tihang 2 should be the next to close in February 2023. The French energy giant Total Energy has signed a further €1.5 billion investment in Qatar to help expand its natural gas production. The company will have a 9.3% stake in the North Field South gas project, the first foreign partner in that section. It's not Total Energy's first investment in Qatar. In June, it signed a €2 billion deal for another gas field project. It comes as Europe scrambles to secure new energy sources.
Many industries in Ukraine have been decimated by Russia's war. Even honey production is expected to drop by up to 40% this year. The country is one of the biggest producers in the world, but its so-called honey belt is in one of the most targeted areas. Beekeeper Alexander Perika had to leave his apiary in the Kharkiv region. It's about 15 kilometers from the Russian border, he says, outside Kharkiv towards Russia. At the time I left, it was February. The bees are going into hibernation, but I left food for them. I had to leave. It was necessary to save my family. Something had to be sacrificed, as they say, so we left the bees behind. Only half of the beehives survived the rocket attacks that hit Alexander's property. He has since returned and has still managed to produce some honey. 1/2 ton compared to 2 tons last year. Denis Soldatov, Vice President of Beekeepers Union of Ukraine, says the country's honey belt is from the south and the east. These are the most productive in commercial honey. Due to the war, we have a situation where most of these commercial apiaries are either not being maintained or were damaged. These are very big losses. The knock-on effect is expected to be felt worldwide. Ukraine is a major producer and exporter of honey, producing in excess 65,000 tons yearly. 60,000 of that is exported across the globe.